All right, testing YouTube audio 1, 2, 3, 4. Check test 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Plan Commission meeting for the City of Delafield, August 28th, 2024, to order at 7 p.m. If you'd all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Sherry, could you please do the roll call?
All right, Mayor Iker,
Here.
Commissioner Hausman,
Here.
Commissioner Cahalan,
Here.
Commissioner Jashinsky.
Here.
Alderperson Grimmer,
Here.
Commissioner Kreinke,
Here.
Commissioner Merrick,
Here.
Commissioner Schultz. Here. City Planner Amy Barrows. Building Inspector Scott Hussinger.
Here.
And I think that's it.
Very good, thank you. So for item 4, discussion and possible action on the minutes for July 31st.
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second, Dan.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, Matt abstains. Okay, minutes are passed. So now we've got citizens' comments for items on the consent agenda, and that would be for it's Cove Salon and Nona Nutrition. So then we'll go on to other comments for the public hearings after this. Is there any comments for items on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Item 6, consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Scott. Ricky.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Or abstentions? Okay, consent agenda is now approved. So now on to public hearings.
Tim, hold on one second. Cove Salon and Nona Nutrition, if you're in the audience, you've been approved. You can stay or leave. It's up to you.
There's no trophies. So 7, public hearings. The first public hearing is for conditional use amendment for the Commodore. And so the way this will go is I'll have Amy, our planner, will explain the ordinance provisions and the process for receiving comments. And then I'll have the applicant come up and give an overview of what the application's for. And then we'll have public comments on the application. And then anything that the Plan Commission would be interested in knowing or request for additional information, and then responses from the applicant, so we can move forward from there. So with that, Amy, why don't you give us an overview?
Sure. Okay, so the Commodore Restaurant on Nagawicka Road does operate under a legal nonconforming use, conditional use, which was originally granted in 1977. The operation existed much longer than that. And then in 1995, the city did approve a conditional use amendment for overflow parking on the east side of Nagawicka Road, subject to several conditions, which include that parking shall not exceed more than 6 times a year, and the time frame was between the months of May through September. And then there was also an expiration date that parking expired in December of 31st of 95. Then a previous operator did request an extension in 1996 to remove that expiration date, and the city did approve that, except they did leave the frequency provisions in and suggested that if there's more than 6 times a year needed, the applicant should come back. The applicant never did come back, but I believe there is a history of the 7 Cs using that property for parking, and probably more than 6 times a year since then. The applicant has reached a lease agreement with the property owner, so the ownership had changed hands, and Weisgerbers maintained ownership on the east side of the road. But the Commodore applicants did reach an agreement with the Weisgerbers, and they happen to own the adjacent property directly north, which is the most visible property to the parking lot, or the least amount of vegetative screening. As part of the request, the applicant is requesting to remove the provisions related to frequency in the conditional use amendment, other than that they are willing to not park on that part of the parking lot when there's more than a ½ inch of snow on the ground. And they would also expect that all vehicles be removed within 1 hour of opening and closing of the operation. The applicant suggests in their materials, and they can speak in a moment, that they are concerned if they don't have the overflow parking, that employees and guests are going to need to park along Nagawicka Road when the lot is full, and they do expect that the lot would be full on a regular basis. And that according to the applicant, they are proposing to eliminate the unnecessary safety risk and inconvenience to property owners impacted by cars parking in front of their properties and potentially encroaching onto their lawns. On the packet, which you can see on the TV screen, it shows the proposed improvements to the parking lot. So they do show the markings of the stalls just for purposes of understanding the volume. However, the parking lot would remain grass, and they do anticipate about 62 stalls. If you go back into their agreement with Weisgerber's, you'll see more parking in that agreement. That's a private agreement between the two owners. This is the plan that they are presenting to the cities with the 62 stalls. They would widen the access point to 24 feet in width. That's a requirement of the city for emergency accessibility purposes. It would continue to have the same gravel-based material that it has today. They're willing to improve the pedestrian walk and add signage on both sides of Nagawicka, or both directions, rather, letting people know that there's a pedestrian crossing. In the report, you'll see that that would need to go to the Public Works Committee for review and approval. They would block off the parking area from the north lot line with ropes, and I believe there's an image in here that is what's currently out on site and what they would continue to use to block off their parking from that adjacent property. This is the existing gate that you can see on the screen. They would use a similar gate. They may need one or two gate doors, I guess you could call them. They would put a sign at the gate stating that that this is private parking and unauthorized vehicles would be towed. Let's see, what else? They do have, again, the space for 62 parking spaces. Those are measured at 9 by 18, which is, meets the requirements of the city. They are proposing a fence along the, let me go back. This map is upside down, by the way, so as you're looking north on the map, that is actually east. So on the south lot line and the east lot line, they are proposing a fence. It is proposed to be a mesh-type temporary material with wood posts. They are agreeing to maintain the property in a neat and orderly fashion. They would have daily litter pickup if there were any, and they're dedicated to preserving and promoting the goodwill of the community in doing that. They will have regular maintenance and keep the grass short, which was the requirement in the 90s. And they are asking that their employees park in that extra parking lot first to provide the most parking for their customers closer to the building. And then again, they would not allow overnight parking and proposing to minimize the winter use to a ½ inch of snow. So as you listen to the applicant present and the public, just keep in mind the conditional use criteria that are required to be met in accordance with the code, which includes that you need to determine that the purpose and intent of the code is met, which is essentially promoting health, safety, welfare, prosperity, aesthetics, orderly development, and general welfare of the community. The request shall not be hazardous, harmful, offensive, or adverse to the environment or value of the neighborhood or community. And considerations should be given to existing uses, emergency protections, traffic movement and control, water, sanitation, and utilities, which would be irrelevant for their proposed use, impact on surrounding values, noise, dust, smoke, odor, and other factors deemed appropriate. And then I guess just to keep in mind that the restaurant and we're not really talking about the restaurant site itself, but the restaurant banquet facility has not changed in size at all compared to what's been out there for many decades. It just happens to be that the new operation has been more popular. They have more significant events, and the success that they are having is requiring the additional parking. But the facility itself has not changed or increased. And the parking area does add safety along Nagawicka Road. People are allowed to park along the road, so it would keep the cars off the shoulders and create more orderly traffic flow and patterns. They do intend on screening the parking lot from the adjacent properties, and it does help the business thrive. With that being said, the consideration does need to be given to the impacts to the neighborhood, which is what you need to consider. And with that, I would go ahead and let the applicants talk. I'll go through potential recommendations or conditions if you choose to recommend approval during the discussion and action portion of the agenda. And just in case you did not go through the packet in detail, there are several letters from neighbors. I believe everybody is checking those. We do not read those letters. They are part of the record. But if you are here and you want to go ahead and repeat what you put in writing, feel free to do so.
We don't read them out loud in the
Right,
meeting.
we don't read them out loud. They're
presume
read.
that they've been
They're
read,
read.
Okay, with that, if the applicant would please come up and introduce themselves, name and address, please, and then brief overview of what you're asking for, even though Amy was pretty detailed, but add what you think is appropriate. You need to press the wide bar on the button to turn the green light on, and you're live. There you go.
I'm David Harrow, 6128 Brumder Road, Heartland, Wisconsin, 53029, and represent the ownership group. Jay and I own it, the property under the banner of HF Hospitality, which is basically ourselves.
Peter Damsgaard, N58 W6181 Columbia Road, Cedarburg, Wisconsin, 53092. Sorry, 12.
Okay, and if there's anything you'd like to add to what Amy presented, that'd be helpful as far as what your application is for.
No, thank you, Amy. That was a very thorough presentation. I would just want to say a couple of things to stress and emphasize. Number one, we were here a couple of years ago to present our plan to this body, and I think we demonstrated that we're committed in our level of stewardship to the community, and that if we were going to do something, as we promised, we're going to do it right. We're going to do it so everyone who lives in the community could be proud of what we've done. So we believe that in kind of redesigning and resurrecting what was a closed restaurant and event space, we did contribute greatly to the social impact of the community. So I hope you just trust that we feel very deep and committed to helping build and provide a good environment for everyone to live and to socialize in. Number one, I just wanted to make that point. Number two, I think, as was mentioned by Amy, what we're asking for is nothing different than really than what has been allowed for since 1995. That is to be able to use the lot for overflow in moments when both the restaurant and the event space are fully booked. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to be every day or every other day. I would assume this would be a minority of the time, probably more so than when it was called the Seven Cs. But this is still something that will be in existence using this parking facility a minority of the time. Number two, safety. We are concerned about safety of the guests, of the employees, of the neighbors, and I think we will make it a safer situation than what existed before. Number three, I would say, is that we're concerned about what we hear about the lighting, and so we are going to enhance the parking facility with some screenage that prevents the neighbors from having to deal with the lights from the cars. We're going to maintain it. We're going to keep it nice and tidy. I think this tidiness and litter pickup and keeping the grass short, again, if anything, I think what you will see is that parking facility will be kept up as good, if not better, than what it had been before. So we're not asking for anything that really didn't exist since 1995. It did say 6 units, but I think as Amy mentioned, we all know it was used perhaps a bit more than that. And I do believe that this will provide safety, tidiness, orderliness. I think something that we all want for people who are using the Commodore and for residents who live in the area. So those would be my comments. Pete, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you did a nice job there. I would also add that knowing how these guys have operated and working alongside, we're willing to look into that screening or lighting as part of with staff or with the Plan Commission to meet any requirements that might come up.
And let it be known, to emphasize something Amy said, no intention of anything other than grass, not putting parking lights in the lot itself, keeping it very natural, keeping it very plain, and again, tidy and orderly.
All right, well, thank you very much. If you don't mind, have a seat, and we'll let anyone who wishes to speak come up. Okay, so anybody from the audience, public, wish to come and speak to this public hearing and this application for the Commodore? Please come up. Mr. Schuman.
While Mr. Schuman is coming up, I don't think I mentioned, they are proposing just low-ground solar lights to help guide people walking from the lot to the road, just so that you know.
I must be on.
Yep.
My name is Philip Schuman, S-C-H-U-M-A-N. The address is 1717 Nacklewicker Road, Delafield, Heartland mailing address. My property is right next to the Commodore. I've been out here since they built a new house since '89, so I've had experiences with a restaurant next door to me. So far, it's been quiet. There have been situations in the former ownership where employees have decided to party outside on the parking lot, and I had to clean up beer bottles. That hasn't happened so far. So I'm glad to hear that this parking space will be for the employees. That's further away from my place. They did promise to work on the drainage of the parking lot, because they used to drain directly into a culvert across my property down to down to Sue McVeigh's property and directly into the lake itself. They put in a stormwater retention system, which retains the stormwater on their property. My neighbor Sue McVeigh, who could not be here tonight, was concerned about lights shining on her house from the parking lot. So they put up a fence and they put up a couple trees. So they've been good neighbors so far. I've lived through the 7 Cs where they're parking on this since it happened. I don't know how you could police 6 times a year or not. Who's going to do that? So that's a question. So if they don't have parking at this space, everybody's going to park on the streets, and that's another problem. So some of my neighbors may have a different opinion, but I really don't have a problem with this because I haven't had a problem with parking on this lot since it's been there. So give it your due considerations, and thank you for serving the city of Delafield, everybody.
Thanks, Phil. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, please.
I'm Louise Peterson, Petersen, 1913 Nacklewicker Road, Heartland, Wisconsin. And couple things that I did write a letter, and I just wanted to read it and maybe some comments afterwards to the Plan Commission and other people interested. My family has resided at 1913 Nacklewicker Road, Heartland, Wisconsin, for 70 years as residential owners in the city of Delafield. It is my intent that the Commodore Restaurant exists as a part of our residential neighborhood, as an asset and not a liability to my family and property. I am concerned that the conditional use of the parking lot owned by Ramona Weisgerber Coomer and Dane Coomer remain as zoned residential in the master plan and not be used for overflow parking for the Commodore Restaurant. The addition of cars on that land up to 365 days a year at an amount of up to 82 cars will certainly change the runoff of water with extra oil and contaminants from vehicles to the surrounding properties. With this drainage going into the soil and with the rainfall along with overflow from possible holding areas, there will be a negative impact of the quality of the water going into Nagawicka Lake. My property will be impacted negatively by the cars proposed to be parked on this lot, with the drainage to the soil potentially affecting my well and those of my neighbors. We source our drinking and household water from our wells. I am concerned about the extra noise caused by those going to their cars, driving in and out of the lot, and their safety of crossing the road at all times of the day and night. I am concerned about the annoyance of headlight beams to surrounding properties, especially in the winter, when bushes and trees will not buffer them. I am concerned how this proposed parking lot would negatively affect my residential property value. I urge you to consider the points I have made and not grant a conditional use for this proposed parking lot for overflow parking. I also want to say if it's the half-inch of snow in the winter, that's a considerable amount of time. And as far as I know, parking on Nagawicka Road, if it's not prohibited, should be prohibited. It's not a particularly wide road, and from time to time, it has been without parking on the road, and it's not very smooth off of the road. I walk that every day, twice a day, and there's some ditches, and I think it would be not good to have cars there. I feel it's not a hardship to the restaurant. They're doing a fine job so far. Just keep the events in check as far as the amount of cars and just possibly, I know they've done this in the past, if it's a bigger event, possibly using busing from another parking site, and hopefully it finds a balance, and that with a good combination of the number of employees and people that you serve, it'll remain a very, very wonderful restaurant and a real asset to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else wish to speak?
I'm not real comfortable doing this.
It's not too bad. Press the bar on the bottom. There you go. And then just name and address, please.
Annie Maslowski, 2012 Nagawicka Road, Heartland, Wisconsin. You want me to go first? Sure. Okay. I wasn't going to talk.
Your mic.
Okay, now
You don't have
I
to
was
hold
not
it.
going to talk. I'm not real comfortable.
take it off, Annie. There
Okay.
you go. Just talk.
I just want to say that we, first of all, I do oppose any changes to this conditional use for any parking on a residential acre lot. We've been in the neighborhood for 32 years, and I remember when this was originally given as a condition between Jack Weisgerber, who owned the restaurant, and his own personal backyard acre lot that he used for overflow parking. I take offense that people chuckle that this was abused, because we've lived there all this time. And what do you do for people who abuse other conditional uses? I mean, it's just not fair for people to abuse a conditional use and it gets looked aside. Is it revoked? Are they fined? Who polices this? Who's in charge of this? And who will continue to enforce it? I mean, was given such a long time ago, and I think the intent was not to be a commercial parking lot as it's being proposed today. I would like to know why the Weisgerbers get special treatment when there's many other conditional uses out there in the city of Delafield. I just think that for her to lease out a conditional use that was meant for their family business, now to be run as a commercial business, is not fair. We all have properties that we could come to the city and say, hey, can we have a conditional use so I can have a landscaper or other people use our property? People in the city of Delafield are not even allowed to park a boat, a trailer, or a motorhome on grass on their property, but you're allowing 85 cars on a residential lot. We look right into that lot. We are north of that. Right now, the trees are all up and the leaves are in, and we really can't see. I can see lights at Weisgerber's house, at Mona's house. But when those trees are down and there are 85 cars pulling in and out, and we are looking out our window, our family room window faces south and looks at that property, I would like you to consider the people who live in that neighborhood. This is a neighborhood. Bartolot has signed a lease knowing that there were 195 parking spots. They're a professional group, and this isn't their first time owning a restaurant. And this isn't their first time running banquets where they have other means of getting people to their restaurant. The success of their restaurant should not be based on changing the conditional use of that lot and changing the master plan when it was a residential lot into commercial property. I just hope that you'll make the right decision and keep this as a conditional use 6 times. I understand it goes with the property, and allow them their 6 times between May and September. And I would hope that if they do not abide by the rules of that, that it's a possibility to revoke this. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to the public hearing? Or would you like to speak? Oh, okay. I thought you were ceding your minute.
We're a couple.
Okay, gotcha.
My name is Mike Maslowski, 2012 Nagawicka Road, Hartland, Wisconsin. I'm Annie's husband. We as neighbors are very concerned, just as David is, for the welfare of the neighborhood. I share the same feelings that he feels about the neighborhood. What he's effectively asking for is not the same old thing that's been going on for the last 25 years and has been routinely violated because there is no enforcement mechanism to monitor it. I beg the question, does anybody here know how many times it's been used this year? Do they let you know when they're going to be using it? Do they check it off? No. What this basically does, and what they're asking for, is to change the master plan of the city of Delafield by expanding this conditional use. Additionally, it is changed from being Jack Weisgerber's backyard for overflow parking. It becomes a commercial parking lot enterprise in a residential neighborhood. Money's being passed. A lease is being signed. This is very different than Jack saying, hey, I want to get the cars off the street because it's a safety issue. We heard this story 25, 30 years ago. It's the same old story. I'm in commercial real estate. I'm a broker. I run my own business. In 30 years, 35 years of practicing commercial real estate, 2 questions were asked before anybody bought a property or leased a property. It would be, number 1, does the building work? Number 2, is it expandable because I never want to move again? And number 3, most importantly, if you run a restaurant, it's, does it have enough parking? These guys are on tape for saying, we don't need any additional parking. All we're asking for is the continual conditional use. No problem. They come back, they want to change the master plan, they want to dump an additional 85 to 100 cars on the streets, and then they say, this is nothing different than in the past because this has always been happening. It's very different. For the last 10 years, the Seven Seas restaurant had been rapidly heading downhill. When Jack left us, it took another dip. When COVID hit, it took another dip, and then for 2.5 years, it was under construction. Terry Giles, who's here, said, wait till they open up. They don't have enough parking. I talked to Mark Schaefer. I said, Mark, they don't have enough parking. They're going to come back. They're going to try to change the game. They're going to try to affect the neighborhood. They're going to try to affect the master plan. It's your classic bait and switch. I like these guys. I want them to do well. They're doing extraordinarily well. I've heard all kinds of rumors of how well they're doing, and they'll continue to do well. But they've got 15 or 16 other locations in the Milwaukee area, and when there's a parking problem, ask them how they handled the parking problem. They're experts at doing this. I was at 4 weddings last year, and they shipped us in on buses.
Mike, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up. You're straying a bit.
So all I'm asking is that you guys will vote this thing no. And then when it goes to the Common Council, 2 neighbors who aren't here tonight, Sue McVeigh and another individual, will probably agree with me and speak at the Common Council level. So please do the right thing. Thank you.
Would anyone else wish to speak? Yes, please. Oh, no, it's not. There you go.
Lynn Minturn, 2537 Horseshoe Bend. My property directly abuts the parking lot. So when you talk about Nagawicka Road, this isn't just affecting Nagawicka Road and potential parking on Nagawicka Road. This is affecting the properties that are abutting the parking lot. Somebody already pointed out that during summer months, really don't see a whole lot. Cars going in and out, you can hear them, it's muffled, don't see a lot of headlights. As soon as the trees are down, I do have a concern, because that is my backyard, that any kind of lighting that will be put in there, I realize they're concerned about safety lighting for people that need to park there. However, that is now my backyard, so I am concerned about that. The question, I did have a question as to what that was zoned. It has been answered that that is residential. So I do agree that coming back after having a conditional permit or conditional use permit and changing it to accommodate something that was already talked about is not what I wish to see happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? She keeps beating you, Terry. You're good.
Is that on now?
Yep.
Okay. Alice Katayama, 1551 Weber Court, Delafield, Heartland. I live in the neighborhood, and I think the restaurant is beautiful, and everyone's happy with how well it turned out and what a lovely job they did with the property. But I think making a permanent commercial parking lot out of that overflow area will change the character of the neighborhood. And I question whether that is not in fact in the watershed of Lake Nagawicka. So I think that has to be considered besides the lighting and the traffic. And there certainly are other options for parking in the area and busing, as people have mentioned. There are a number of large parking lots nearby that are not used very often that would probably be very happy to have some revenue coming in for those special occasions when this overflows. So we all want the restaurant to be successful, but I think this was a problem that could have been anticipated and perhaps was or wasn't, but it shouldn't be solved on the backs of the neighbors, especially the neighbors nearby. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Giles.
Seem to be a regular here.
We'll get brownie
It's
points.
still on?
Yep.
Terry Giles, 1607 Weber Court. Couple of things. Nobody has spoke about the traffic problem that we have, the speed of the vehicles that are going up and down Nagawicka Road. that is a significant concern. Think about the accident that just happened in front of our property. We had a car coming down the road, estimated at 80 miles an hour, didn't make it around the curve, broke a power pole in half, took out a bunch of bushes, rolled the car 3 times. What if he would have made it around the curve and hit the crosswalk at 80 miles an hour? What if there would have been someone in the crosswalk? Are we really going to put a crosswalk across Nagawicka Road? It is a residential area. As a matter of fact, I didn't know that we could park cars up and down both sides of Nagawicka Road to the point where you could only get one car through. I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't realize that that was legal. It surprises me. As far as the logistics of doing it with the ditches and the culverts along that road, I'm surprised that anybody would do it to begin with. One of the things that I do recall when we listened to the propositions of the Commodore is that property was brought up. It was discussed. And the owners said they were not interested in that property. There was a question, are you going to buy it? Are you going to acquire it? Are you interested in that property? The answer was no. I tried to buy that property one time, and they said no. But the point being that I think you have to consider the speed. We have a speed problem on Nagawicka Road. We know that. We've discussed that at this meeting. And this is a perfect example where we need to be careful. Yes, we need to control it. Now, suppose that we put in some type of a crosswalk, and it's a monitored crosswalk, and maybe it's got a button and a light that's flashing, and it stops the cars. And the cars back up all the way past the curve. Then what do you have? Probably another accident. I think it's a bad idea. I agree. I don't think that Delafield should have a commercial parking lot in a residential area. I understand that it is proposed to be just for team members, just for employees. But what happens when I've got 30 cars, clients, customers, and there's 30 stalls empty across the road, and I'm full on my property? What's going to happen? They're going to go across the road, and you can't blame them. I kind of agree with the last group, and their comment is that Bartolata has been doing this a long time. They're very familiar with the parking. And yes, I did make a comment that I personally felt that they probably were going to have limited parking because of if for nothing else, the grandeur that they have developed there. It's a beautiful place.
Could you please sum it up, please?
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
Point is, I don't think that we should be putting a crosswalk across Nagawicka Road. I don't think we should have public parking in a residential area. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes.
Hello, James Lowe, live at 2021 Nagawicka Road, just up the road across the street from Mike Maslowski and Amy. Just wanted to go on record saying that I'm opposed to the request for many of the reasons that were commented. Concerns with the crosswalk, with the additional traffic. I think busing or other parking use would service the need if they need to in special events. I think they really should manage the business in a residential neighborhood at the size and scale that they originally proposed, as opposed to potentially taking advantage of multiple events in the space when historically it hasn't been used that way. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on public hearing number 1? Yes, sir.
My name's Dennis Rossetti. I live with my wife at 2120 Nagawicka Road in Heartland mailing address 53029. I'm Mike Maslowski's neighbor to the south. So I agree with pretty much all the comments that have been made, and I submitted written comments. I won't, make you suffer through listening to them again. But I do want to emphasize the character of the neighborhood, which is a quiet residential neighborhood. Nagawicka Road is a relatively narrow street. It has no shoulder. There's no sidewalks. I see my neighbors out walking, bicycling, their kids on their electric scooters. So anything that increases traffic is going to be a risk for people. And I also think Mike made a very good point, which is that people came to the Planning Commission originally to say, we want to reopen this restaurant, make a new space. And at that time, if they had issues with parking, that was the time to present them and have that discussed. But they didn't. And so it does sort of sound like they're trying to do a bait and switch here. And I recognize that you can have success beyond what you imagined and planned for, but still, I think it changes the character of the neighborhood to say you could have parking there any day of the year. So I'm opposed to this. I urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on public hearing number 1? Okay, does anyone on the Plan Commission have questions for the applicant at this point to clarify?
I have several.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind
David,
coming
Ms.
back up.
Dean, want to come up, or? Yeah. Are we closing the public hearing, or are we?
No, we're just going to clarify anything that was presented. As far as diving into other topics that haven't been brought up, we'll save that for when it comes up in the agenda.
I'll just address them to David, since you seem to be the captain of the team. And
He's the expert.
Okay. Well, you can, I know that the lease agreement between you and Weisberger is not really related to us, but there is something I just want to clarify in that agreement. It indicates that the parking area may be used for parking, which is what we're here to talk about, and storing vehicles and other ancillary uses. Is your intention to store vehicles there?
Just to clarify one thing, the lease with the Weisgerbers is with Bartolotta Restaurant Group.
Okay.
And so we're the owner of the property. But no, there's no intention, Megan, if you want to, from Bartolotta, but there's no intention to store. The only proposed use for this space is for the occasional use of overflow parking of up to 62 cars.
Okay.
The only. No storage, no overnight, no, nothing other than an automobile.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. It sounds like I'm going to throw out a number and just kind of get an over or under. When you think about your hours of operation, or days, I should say, over the course of a year, Mondays, I think you're closed, would you say that the use of the lot would be over 50% of your days of operation or under? I know I'm asking you to speculate, but.
Right, look into the future. I would say it's going to be at or under the 50%.
Would you mind providing your name and address?
Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. My name is Megan McKenna, McKenna. My address is W132S6943 Fenimore Lane, Muskego, Wisconsin, 53150. And I am here on behalf of the Bartolotta Restaurant.
Thank you.
So.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Scott, can I interrupt? Just to clarify that answer, when you said less than 50%, is that less than 50% of the days that you're open or less than 50% of the calendar year?
Less than 50% of the days we are open and
Thank you.
operating.
Would you be willing, you have a gate there, would you be willing, when you're not anticipating needing that lot, to close the gate? Just so.
Absolutely, that would be in our operating procedures for that space.
Okay, Thank you. Those are the questions
Yes.
I had.
You indicated on, or it's indicated in the packet, that winter use, proposing to use the parking lot year-round unless there's more than a half-inch of snow on the ground. Is it your intent to plow the lot?
I think that's what the measurable was for the half inch or less, was not to plow the lot because we don't want to destroy the property at all. We want to maintain it.
Okay, so the months of our snowy winters could be December through March, then that lot goes unused, assuming there's greater than a half-inch of snow.
Correct, but historically, especially looking at last year, it wasn't a very snowy year, so we want to be able to use that property if we have to maintain the safety on the road, so.
Any other requests?
Can you comment? I do remember when you guys first came here that somebody asked, it may have even been the mayor, about parking. And so it was stated, somebody referenced like, oh, we're going to be fine, we don't need it. Can you elaborate on what changed, how this has transpired on that front?
I do remember parking coming up, and did Keith answer that question?
I am not sure.
I guess we would just say that at that point, I don't know if we even had an operator then.
We may not have even.
Yeah. I think if I remember right, I don't, at least not.
Turn your mic on, Dan.
It wasn't known.
Turn-
Oh. If I remember right, because I was here, I remember, I don't think at that point it was publicly known it would be Barlotta. Maybe you didn't know yourself.
Well, then, if you have the date.
I don't, but I just remembered, I remember being asked because leading up to the building, you've got nice, wide, very impressive entrance, right? And I remember the question being asked is that, do you want to put more parking spaces in there? So we heard from the citizens the question of what changed? Why do we, so that's why I asked, is just get clarification on that.
Yeah, I can't speak to the timing, but I can speak to the number of parking stalls. We've maintained the same number of parking stalls. We made that parking lot much more efficient, and we're able to add that center drive. There's also, that center drive is built to have some parallel parking built in, so we were able to maintain the current number of spots in there.
I think, what I remember, and we did look at the minutes, I could not find any discussion about this in the minutes, and I did not go back to the videos, but based on discussions with the owner, whether they were in this meeting setting or not, my understanding was at the time, they were not, Bartolotta's was not the user yet. And also, I don't believe the owners were in a position to get a lease from the Weisgerbers, and the Weisgerbers were not selling that lot at the time, so it wasn't really an option. But I think what may have come up in the meeting setting is, at least at one point, the parking was, because of the extra green space that they were adding to improve the stormwater management facilities and to improve the drainage, and then to have the entrance down the middle, they were going to reduce the parking from maybe like by 20 spots. And so there was a question of, because you're reducing the parking, do you still feel like you have enough parking? And that's where I believe the comment came in. But at the time, the property wasn't available, is what I remember.
Thank you.
But that's all hearsay unless it's in the video, so. But we have quite a few internal meetings outside of these formal meetings.
No, I just want to ask, because I remember a lot of discussion about the lighting and the parking, and I do remember now that you say that some of the parking was reduced because of the aesthetics of the stormwater. So, and clearly we heard from citizens the lighting is working, right? We're not having issues there.
Any other questions to clarify from the applicant at this time? All right, thank you very much. This will come up on the agenda in a minute.
Just while the public hearing is open, Pete, can you just describe, I heard several comments about car lights potentially trespassing on adjacent properties. Can you describe the fencing that you're proposing and where it's proposed to go?
Sure, we would propose on the, let me get my cardinal directions here, on the east and the south side of the parking lot, so adjacent to the residential area to the north is the Weisgerbers. They're well aware of it. We've proposed to put the fencing in there. They have elected that that's not important to them. The fencing would be 4 feet high, would be an opaque material that would capture any light trespass. and would be setback per the staff report, the 25 feet from the property lines. So it's pretty far inside. We've also tried to orient the parking east-west to reduce the amount of light, the way cars drive through the parking lot would reduce the amount of light trespass.
I'm sorry, I've got one more follow-up question, just to establish that this lot is orderly. How do you designate spots? We've got, what, 62 spots that we've identified. How is that, is it intuitive? People know where to go?
Sure.
You've got stakes, I hear, or I'm
Yeah,
reading?
so the goal here is when this lot, if there's prolonged periods of time where it's not used, we don't want to add a whole lot of permanent structures to the parcel. We want to maintain the character as much as possible. So the solution there would be to use the stanchions and the ropes. They would designate the parking aisles, not individual spots, but the outline of where you can park, and then, which by default will help define the drive lanes. So if you have that site plan up, I could probably speak to it a little bit. There's a dash line that's showing we will park from here to
Mike,
here.
can you put the plan on the screen? Thank you.
So you can see on there's the dash lines that if you ignore the parking stripes, but the outer dash lines, those would be roped off so that you would know you couldn't park beyond this point, and you have cars between these 2 points, and then intuitively you would park as, comfortably close to each other as possible. The reason not to stripe it is without making it a hard surface, it'd be a little strange. You could potentially stripe it like a field if you wanted, and then you would have to paint it every so often as it gets mowed away. So that's how we're going to accomplish that designated parking area, if you will.
Thank you.
I do have one more question regarding any kind of in-lot lighting. There was concerns about that mentioned. What is your proposal for any type of in-lot lighting?
Yeah, so what the proposal is there's solar-powered lights.
It's sideways on here.
Yeah. They're, I don't know the exact dimension off the top of my head, but they're, nominally less than 2 feet tall. They shine light down. They would be like a garden pathway light that you might see. So they're low-powered. They're physically low levels. And they would be used just to provide the necessary safety for people walking to and from their cars.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Oh, wait.
So I don't think
Are they comfortable closing the hearing?
Yeah, everyone comfortable closing the public hearing at this point? Okay, so at this point, the public hearing number 1 is closed, and this item will come up on the agenda in a little bit. We do have another public hearing number 2, a special exception for floor area ratio and open space on a non-conforming lot. That's DELC 0751025, which is 2730 Nagawicka Road, and the owner is John Borman, and the applicant is Patrick Smith. Amy, could you please give us an overview of this?
Okay, so this item was discussed at last month's meeting, but just to recap for the public hearing, the property is 8,116 square feet with frontage on a channel on the west side of Nagawicka Lake. They're proposing to raise an existing residence and shed and build a new residence with attached garage. They are requesting to exceed the floor area ratio and open space provisions, which they can request a special exception from the Plan Commission on because the lot is non-conforming to size. The minimum requirement for the RL2 zoning is 10,000 square feet, so they're about 2,000 square feet short. So as part of that special exception process, floor area ratio under no circumstance can exceed 4,000 square feet or 0.45 floor area ratio, which is whichever one is more restrictive. They're proposing 3,411 square feet or 0.42 floor area, so they meet that provision. And then they're proposing a footprint of 1,972 square feet, and they can't exceed 3,000 square feet. So they're well within that provision as well. So in order to obtain approval from Plan Commission, they do need to meet the standards for a special exception, which includes demonstrating that the proposal is a reasonable use of the property and that it would not be contrary or inconsistent with the spirit and intent of the code, and it doesn't result in a hazardous, harmful, noxious, offensive, or create a nuisance to the neighborhood or natural resources. And the applicant in his write-up in the application materials does suggest that the home is compatible in scale, massing, and materials with the majority of the other homes in the neighborhood, and that the existing home footprint is 1,280 square feet, and the proposed home footprint is 1,680 square feet with an added attached garage instead of a shed on the property. The other thing that's worth noting is that the new home otherwise conforms to all setbacks, whereas the existing home does not comply to the road setbacks or the offset requirements, and in both circumstances, they met the shore setback. The property is pretty flat. I don't know if you remember from last meeting, it's flat, and we talked about the fact that they would need retaining walls constructed and to hold up the driveway. They have modified the retaining wall construction, so they are no longer located within the road right-of-way. And the highest point of the wall is 3.7 feet tall, so they still do need Plan Commission approval. It's not necessarily part of the public hearing portion of the project, and then they will need engineer approval for that because of the height. And then we also want to make sure, you'll want to make sure that the project does not cause adverse drainage on adjacent properties because of the fill and closeness to the lot lines, which does comply with the setbacks, but it is still an important piece of the project. And then they do meet, I mean, we can talk about this during the regular section too, but there are several criteria that have to be met for the construction of retaining walls, and it does appear that they meet all of those criteria, and that's laid out in the staff report.
Okay, with that, would the applicant mind coming up, introduce themselves, name and address, please, and give an overview in addition to what Amy shared?
I'm John Borman, BOHRMAN, 2730 Negawicka Avenue. I'm the owner of the property. I should mention that I'm also the owner of the property right next to it, 2736. I'm my own neighbor on one side. I'll let Pat speak.
Yeah, and I'm Patrick Smith, the architect, John Borman's friend from grade school. So I'm at 5916 North Shoreland Avenue, Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin.
Are you the neighbor to the north or south?
Pardon?
Are you the neighbor to the north or south of your other property?
I'm to the north.
Okay.
Okay, do you have anything to add to Amy's?
No, she did a
Amy's
really
statements?
good job. She helped us out quite a bit just to get to this point and understand everything that we had to do. I think the most important thing is that we're really not changing the fabric of the neighborhood with this house. It's going to fit in nicely to what's there right now. And John's super passionate about the neighborhood, and he doesn't want to do anything that's going to harm or make anything feel out of place. So we've been at this for a little while, and excited to see where it goes.
All right, thanks. Sorry for making you play musical chairs, but I don't know, is anyone in the audience interested in commenting on public hearing number 2? Seeing none, do we have any questions for the applicant to clarify anything that's been presented so far?
Just wanted to ask John if he gets along with his neighbor.
I do very well.
All right, gentlemen, thanks. If we're comfortable, I will close public hearing number 2. Thank you. We'll talk to you in a bit. Okay, so now citizens' comments on items other than on the consent agenda. Mary?
Good evening, everyone. It's Mary Daniel, 309 Wisconsin Avenue, here in Delafield. I'd like to speak to the public hearing that just took place for the Commodore. I hope that everyone here can come to a reasonable solution to keep the neighborhood happy and ensure the success of the Commodore, because the Commodore is an asset to Delafield, and they have done an outstanding job. And there's a lot of history there, and I think we need to help preserve the history. So I'm counting on everyone to find a solution to this. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Anyone else have public comments for anything else on the agenda? All right, seeing none, comments, citizens' comments are now closed. So now, unfinished business, 9A. DELC 0782996003 Nagawicka Road and DELC 0782001001 1807 Nagawicka Road. This is the Commodore conditional use amendment and site plan appearance review to modify the restrictions related to the overflow parking.
Okay. I don't have anything else to add, other than I do have a possible motion with recommended conditions. I don't know if you want me to just go through those to help your conversation, or wait until you're done asking any additional questions.
I would ask one. I did not, so you can park on Nagawicka Road up and down that entire stretch? That's not illegal parking?
My understanding from the city administrator is that it is available for parking.
Yes,
Fair.
yeah, it is.
Okay.
I guess I have a question on legality or this relationship. So the conditional use permit is with the owner of the property,
A conditional,
not the Bartolotas?
it can be with the applicant. I mean, the owner has to sign off on the application, or at least support the application, which they've done through the lease agreement. But the applicant operator can apply for a conditional use permit. The other thing that I think is important, the restaurant was originally approved as a non-conforming use, conditional use, and then that was amended to provide for the overflow parking. References have been made to the master plan. If you look at the state statutes, conditional uses are not subject to the land use criteria of the master plan, which is residential in any case, because that's kind of the premise behind a conditional use, is that they are unique uses that don't neatly fit into the code or in any particular zoning district. They fit based on certain criteria being met. So I give the example of churches quite frequently. They are a conditional use. Sometimes they are in agricultural districts, sometimes they are in business districts, and sometimes they are in residential districts. So really, the idea behind the conditional use is to then lean on the provisions of the code itself, which I went through earlier in the public hearing section.
So it's okay for this parking area to be leased by someone other than the property owner across the street? It's a little confusing to me.
It is,
You've
it
got
is.
a property owner, you got a restaurant operator, you got another property owner.
And,
Just question whether.
This was somewhat of a history project for staff.
I mean, I understood before it was one owner through all that entities.
Maybe, I mean, was it a personal owner, did a company own the restaurant, or did he
True,
own the property? I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
It's almost irrelevant based on the fact that we're talking about the properties and what runs with property versus the individuals.
What would make a difference is if it wasn't overflow parking to accommodate the Commodore or that particular site, then it would no longer be part of that. It was a CU amendment to the restaurant.
I get that.
So if, provided the restaurant remains, and that's one of my conditions, it would be valid. If that restaurant went away, it's really no longer a valid use to have on that site. The neighbor to the north couldn't just say, well, now I want a parking lot attached to my house, for commercial purposes, that is. That would not be part of the CU amendment. It's specific to the restaurant across the street.
Yeah, calling this a public parking lot is not.
So if Dave and Jay owned this parking area, it wouldn't change anything we're talking about today?
The ownership is really irrelevant, other than granting permission to the applicant. It's the applicant that needs to be tied to, the address is 1807 Nagawicka Road.
That clarifies, sorry, Mike.
No, that's fine, Dan, you were talking. Because I get concerned about the notion that it is a public parking lot, and suddenly that is a variation from, I mean, that's not within the zoning and that kind of thing, but it's a significant exception to the rule is under these circumstances, we can use this function, but that's it. And I get, my first concern was paving. If we paved that parking lot, that's a real problem, but they agreed not to. If they can function as a parking lot, overflow, that's much less of an issue. it's up to them to make sure it works in winter and that kind of thing.
So Amy,
Like-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so Amy, Scott, you clearly read every detail on that. You picked up, like, the part about the storage, that's a lease between them. It's not intended to be storage, so do we have the ability to say, well, you can't sign that agreement because you can't use the word storage? Strike the word storage, it's parking, but
Well-
it's said in that lease storage, so I know they said the intent isn't, but, so then don't put it in the document. Can
Yeah,
we-
well, so to be fair, the lease agreement's between them and Weisgerber's, but they can't violate the city's conditional use. So regardless of what's in that agreement, they can't, we would not be party to that, but they can't violate the conditional use, which they'll have to record an agreement. And so one of the conditions I have in here is, and I added a condition based on Scott's comment, or modified it. Vehicles shall only be parked within the lot during approved business hours of operation and within 1 hour of opening and closing. And then to add, no overnight parking or storage of vehicles is permitted, to just emphasize that. That would be the legal standing. They can have their own discrepancies or issues between them, but if they parked overnight, that would become a violation of the conditional use, which is enforceable. I mean, we do, if there's a violation that's taking place, the city needs to hear about it in order to enforce it. But CUs are enforceable and they are revocable.
I would push even further to say no boats, no boat trailers, no ATVs. I think it should be even more restrictive. Because right now it just sounds like vehicles for the restaurant.
Sure.
I would say no storage of
Or storage of vehicles
recreational
or
type
equipment.
vehicles.
Would it be easier to rule things in rather than rule them out?
Only.
Only.
For the
Cars
employees
parking.
and. no-
Yes.
Business.
Just, when you just note
Yeah.
that automobiles associated as guests of the Commodore. I mean,
Or employees.
and employees, yeah.
Yeah, that would be easier than
Yeah.
listing a bunch and then you miss something.
So I wasn't here when you first talked about it. What about I was thinking about rain and snow and how that could be a mud pit. But then on one hand, you don't want to throw a bunch of asphalt down, right? And did you guys talk about that last meeting, about
Little
that risk of just, it's a rainy day and and you see it just turns into a mud bath, right? And you didn't talk a whole lot
A
about
little
it?
bit, I think along those lines, there should be a provision that the road stays clean. They certainly could track a lot of mud across that road coming in and out. It might be dry when they park and a storm hits and it's a mess coming out.
So Dan, for that, being the Public Works, for that kind of area, it is worse to put asphalt down for,
Well, for
Drainage
drainage
and-
and
yeah.
infiltration, environmentally, it would,
Yeah, we'd be absolutely opposed to it if they
Yeah.
paved it.
yeah.
Just
You
from the
would
lake
be
perspective.
required to have a detention pond, probably. And I'm with Mike, I would be opposed to that.
Yeah, after all the good work that the Commodore did in managing stormwater runoff, that would be completely in the wrong direction.
Has there been any problems in the past reported to the city with mud on the road from the parking lot?
I'm not aware of any.
I'm saying that I'm not aware of any does not mean that there hasn't been any.
Right, yeah. I just wanted to ask.
As a history project, did you guys find any complaints about the CU originally?
Well,
Because the
so
belief was that it was violated on a regular basis, but
So the kind of conundrum here is the whole idea of proposing it in the first place was presented to the Plan Commission, the city, as a solution to a problem with people parking on the roads. And there's speculation that if only we could do this 6 times a year, that'll take care of that problem that we have 6 times a year. And those are the terms that was issued under. And at the time, it was issued for a year. Kind of see how it goes, I'm guessing. That's still a tool the city uses now. I don't know if it's best practices, but we've done that in the past where we've had something that maybe need tuning up after a year to look back at the conditions that were put on initially and then adjust them. But at the second, go around to the city, these are in the minutes of the meeting. The concerns were just, I don't know if the people forgot about it, wasn't well noticed, but it was an adjustment to a conditional use, so it would have been publicly noticed. But the follow-up was just a renewal, indefinite renewal of the 6 times a year provision. And so knowing that the CU exists, they're asking that the time restrictions be lifted, right? I mean, that's essentially what we're being asked to do. So based on the complaints or potential complaints or concerns, is there a way to mitigate the issues that were brought up from the neighborhood in a way that would strike any kind of a balance to helping them accomplish what the applicant wants to do and not exacerbating an issue with the neighborhood? So it's
I'd
interesting,
like
right?
to see us get to that point where we can kind of have a win-win here. And I do think carte blanche every day is too much. Just listening to the neighbors. And I think it's very important to listen to the people that are neighbors to this.
What I thought was interesting is, and because the neighbors can't speak now, they can talk to them after the meeting, but if we don't do anything, people will park on Nagawicka Road.
People are parking on Nagawicka Road.
They will. They'll just, and that seems to be, like, I'm surprised the neighbors didn't bring that up. Like, man, that would be a big problem. Worse than the grass parking lot. Having everybody up and down Nagawicka, it will be a disaster. But nobody brought that up, which seems odd to me. Maybe people didn't realize that was allowed to park it there. And now that we know that, we're like, ooh, that's not a good solution.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think a safety issue of allowing cars to park on the road, puts a greater safety risk to the people that live on the road who want to walk. Now you can't walk on the side of the road. You're stuck either going in the middle of the road or walking on your neighbor's yard. The potential of damage being done to yards right off the road is high and more than likely very probable. So I think when you look at when you weigh the safety risks, you're reducing it by allowing it to be parking on that lot. That's at least a step in the right direction for that particular topic right there.
I think there is
If the parking lot is full, that people won't park on the road, that's always a possibility too. But, so I look at that as a win for the parking lot type of, issue is at least getting the vehicles off of Nagawicka Road there.
Which was the original intent.
Which was the original intent of the reason of allowing that to take place.
Dan, your point, I think, is a good one. In my mind, there's, I think, a natural governor to the number of days, and that's why I asked the question of over or under. The other thing I use when I think about this is that they've had, I guess we're closed for them to comment on my comment, but I read that they have 90 events that are booked that would require the use of that property. And although they've only been open a short period of time, I understand that many of these events, just like weddings tend to book out a year in advance, were booked out many months ago. And so I think that we're looking at when the restaurant's open and they have a wedding or they have any other kind of group activity, my guess is that 90 or 95, because those are typically booked 6 to 12 months in advance, is probably what we can expect, which, 90 is not a small number, but it's not 360 either, or 350.
And would it be mostly, it seems to me like a lot of this overflow would be on weekends.
You got to think it's like a
Thursday
wedding
through Sunday or
and dinner,
something.
right? They're having a wedding and dinner at the same time. Would be, right?
Because anything held on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or something like that, you probably wouldn't have a wedding with that.
Yeah, probably
And
business.
it's
Businesses
reduced
might have a
dining.
gathering, but I think weekends are probably the most common out of those 90 events, is what I would speculate. But
So is the suggestion limiting the overflow parking to those weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
It's a start.
Why, I guess? I mean,
Or
we're
would
still
it be
gonna
self-directed? They have 90 events, they'll use overflow parking 90 times, regardless of when it occurs.
Which could never be policed.
Yeah, are we setting
Days
a
a week.
limit to make
Days a week.
ourselves feel better?
No,
Because
we're
what
setting
are
a
you gonna
limit
do
to
with
balance
that?
the concerns of the neighbors.
Neighbors,
But, okay, what's the alternative then? When the parking lot is not allowed to be used, where are people going to park?
yeah, I'm not suggesting a limit. I'm just saying there's,
Well, that's- I think
appears to be a natural governor here. I'm sure there are
would the
people in
applicant-
the
would you mind-
audience who aren't going to be happy with,
Do we have
let's say it's
questions
90.
direct for them?
I think so.
Okay, would you mind stepping up, so, because we just, I think there's some thought process that would be helpful if you were asked to weigh in on.
And maybe that one is it. What's the scenario when you're finding yourself so far needing the overflow, right? Is it just weddings and dinner, a Friday night dinner at the same time?
I don't want to limit it just to weddings, because we also have to keep in mind holiday parties, other larger events that could occur, including holidays, which I'm fairly certain fell within the 6 days that the Weisgerbers had agreed upon. Mother's Day, Easter, events like that would be outside of a wedding. But it is going to be when we have those larger events that are happening in the banquet facility, also a very successful restaurant floor happening, so. I wish I could say it was 6, 7 days a week, but it's not going to be.
Well, let me rephrase. Is it banquet plus dinner is when you get into that spot?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And presumably, when you have corporate events, which typically are during the week, based on my personal experience, you also don't have a full restaurant.
Typically not.
For larger events, could you have valet parking to this lot?
We can have valet parking, but again, that doesn't solve the problem of do we have enough parking stalls? Because even with valet parking, you still have to safely park people's vehicles in order to, reduce the risk of damage to vehicles or anything like that.
I can relate to all of this. Anytime you live near a business, there has to be some give and take. And it's wonderful when you have a great neighbor, which I think that your operation is a very upscale and very good business. It's much more difficult when you don't have a good neighbor. I can relate to the lights. I can relate to the screening. And the hours, I can relate to all that. It's tough for me because, you want to find some middle ground here. That's why I asked about the valet parking, because I thought that would make it safer instead of having customers crossing the road.
And again, I think the main intention for that spot is for employee use.
Okay.
Now, with Weisgerbers having used it, on an unrecorded amount of times, that doesn't mean we can't say a guest who might have been accustomed to using that space isn't going to help themselves, because that's where they did park, they were used to parking there. But our intention with the private property sign, private parking, is to really ensure that as best as we can as the operator, without having to check cars in, valet park our staff over there, to help encourage that it is truly just for staff use.
My thinking on this, and I share your concerns about and empathy with people who want to have this so that it's not wrecking the neighborhood. I think coming up with what might be arbitrary or capricious guidelines is for me, I take a step back and say, here's a business that's been operating for 30 years. Yeah. And whether they were using them for 6, and most of the neighbors said, that 6 went out the window, I'm exaggerating, a week after it went in place. So this has been going on for a long time. And I think where the compromises that you're talking about and that Denise mentioned is the lighting that's off and it reflects low. Not putting concrete that's going to, flow into the lake. And by the way, I think the fact that they lost 20 spaces to avoid flowage into the lake is one reason why they're 20 spaces short. So, that was a compromise. I think they have to be very considerate of the neighborhood, and there might be things that come out in the future where they may need to do some things that we don't put in Amy's list tonight. But it seems like they were trying to be really good neighbors. There's this history that it's existed, and they're trying to do the best they can to make it be similar to the way it was. And I'm not aware personally of a lot of angst for this enterprise to rekindle itself from that 25-year history. So that's kind of how I view this.
I think where I'm coming from, and I really like what they've done, no issues with what they've done over there, it's beautiful, is what would prevent them from using that for their employees every night, even if they don't need it?
Good judgment, reliance on what we've decided and what we can put into the
Agreement.
into the actual motion.
That's where I'm getting
And
at.
knocking on the door if they seem to be not following the spirit and letter of what we agreed to.
That's
I
the
guess,
only,
Dan, you could call it, couldn't you call it has to be overflow? I mean, again, how do you police it, but.
when we won't, but I think that's kind of where I'm getting at. Is
You
I'm
could-
not trying to make this a burden on them, but if you just let it be open, they could be using it for employee parking every night and then that's just disrupting the neighbors.
Yeah, and I don't know
They
why.
may not need it.
What would be the interest in doing that for them? Their employees got to
Well, how
walk.
do you know when,
People, human habits.
you know?
Yeah, but why would they want to walk 20 yards further when they don't need to?
I think it'll happen, but
Well, then I think it's up to maybe some of the neighbors they can knock on my door, and I'm willing to have a conversation with,
But they're going to have gates, and the gates won't be open unless there is this need for
well,
the
that's my
parking.
suggestion. We would have to put that in the motion, but my suggestion would be to lock the gates,
Right,
except when they know they're going to need to use that lot.
I'm fine with that.
yeah.
Agreed. Would, for discussion purposes, as was done in 95 and 96, would you put, and I'm not married to this in either way, but I'm just curious, would we put a year's restriction on it and come back in a year as they did in the past? See how it's working, see if it needs modification?
I
Or
guess
is that unnecessary?
that's a good question. I'm looking at number 10 on Amy's list, and the ability to revoke the CUP. It just, what's the latitude we have of doing that? Like if, we can, in good faith, give them everything they're asking for, and we find out it's being violated, how can we go ahead and
Well,
keep that
see,
from-
you can do a couple different things. One is if you're receiving many complaints, they're either not complying with the code or there's a demonstration that they're not meeting the purpose and intent of the ordinance. You do have to schedule a public hearing, you do have to notify the applicants, but you could process a potential revoking. The other option, which, I mean, some communities do on actually a routine basis, is to require an annual review. It's not saying you're revoking or changing anything, but they have to come in on an annual basis for an update. Or every 5 years, that would be up to you. So that's another option too, if you don't want to call it out as possibly revoking it, but just a update on the status.
A review.
Get a copy of the police reports if there are any, or neighbor concerns, would be one option.
Matt, is that where you were going? Because I kind of jumped out on your question.
No, I'm satisfied with Amy's answer. I'm satisfied that if there were issues, that we would do as our city planner indicated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you chose the annual update route or annual review route, you would want to put that in as a condition.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I also would put the locking of the gate, because that, again, is something that you can slip up on, but if it puts skin in the game for someone to be assigned that task, as opposed to once they walk out of here, people go on with their daily thoughts, and it's not about locking gates. So, I mean, I think that's another thing we can put in that provides a sense of discipline, and then, and when you have the annual report.
So
Scott, would you
is there
propose?
is there a provision for when the gate does not need to be locked? Entry gates shall remain locked unless parking is
Unless, well, I'll,
necessary as deemed by the developer or?
necessary based
operator?
on the expected overflow parking into the ancillary lot.
That would, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't want it open all day. Like, if you're closed Mondays, you don't want it open on Monday.
Right.
Amy, with the conditional use review, I don't know if we've done that before.
The annual review.
Annual review. So does that put all the conditions in the conditional use up for audit, review, and modification on an annual basis?
Not necessarily. It can just be having an update with the applicant. Actually, they're not noticed either, usually as a public hearing or anything. It's just an update on how things are going, maybe a report on how often are you using it for overflow parking? Have you received any complaints? Are there any issues? Has the city, any of you heard any complaints? And then talk through that. If there's a potential, if that results in a potential modification of the conditional use or conditions, you'd have to go back through the public hearing process.
And who's this review being done by? You? Or
Plan-
City?
Well, that's up to you.
Yeah.
Typically, it would be the plan, I would suggest probably just the plan commission, that it may not need to go to plan commission and council for those updates. And then, but if there's any issues that come of it, then they would have to, you'd have to set up the public hearing.
We actually did this. We did it with Fishbones. Remember the music, outdoor music?
It was a 1 year.
Yeah.
It was a 1 year application. We said we come back in a year.
Yep.
And if, based on complaints, we'll renew it or we won't.
Yep.
That we've done that similar with Divine Redeemer. They had outdoor classroom facilities with semis.
Yep.
And that was an annual thing. It wasn't, hey, how are things going? It was, if things aren't going well, your CU's over.
Get it.
Yeah.
So you can write it you can write it however you want to
That has
write.
teeth in it.
How do you, on that, I mean, I think there's some appeal to that, but there seems to be a qualitative element to that too. You get 3 people with strong voices complaining all the time.
But it's exactly the process we're in tonight, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have
So, I mean, I think that
facts,
there's some merit to
speculation.
that, but I think it might seem more simple than it might turn out to be execution-wise.
Usually it's.
But
I understand.
I certainly
Isn't
like
it?
the idea of having a review, and I think those same voices can come in, plus others, pro or con. And I think who's ever sitting here and who's ever in the Common Council can take the next step without having, 12 months from now, judging how many complaints, et cetera. So I don't know, that's just off the top of my head.
So you understand, the way to revoke a CU is if they're not complying with the terms of the CU.
So the way it's written, and because I copied this straight from the code, so this would be separate from an annual review. The city has the right to revoke the conditional use amendment if the parking, well, in this case, I wrote it for this proposal, but if the parking does not conform with the conditions of the approval, so that would be all of the conditions we list, where a change in the character of the surrounding area or of the use itself causes it to be no longer compatible with the surrounding area, or for similar cause based upon considerations of public health, safety, and welfare, the conditional grant may be terminated by action of the Common Council following referral to the Plan Commission, the public hearing notice.
So it seems to me like that's a chit that's always available. And if we're talking about trying to do this with the community, and it would be to start with an annual review. And if we're hearing a lot of issues, that would be the next step.
Did we have on record through, police department or the city hall, do we have any complaints while 7Cs was supposedly violating that half a dozen times throughout the year? I mean, this is over, I'm hearing this as like a 25-year span. So if it was really that bad, I would have imagined that there would have been a pretty thick file on complaints.
You're asking for documentation on.
Is there any documentation?
On a complaint in
What I'm
2000?
getting, is there any substantiating of
Well,
that? And
I think the issue
That's my
is-
curiosity.
Where
is-
were
I think the
those-
issue is apples and oranges, because
You know.
7Cs was not full.
No, I'm just saying.
So they,
It's a question that came up in my mind of, I'm not doubting that they weren't, following their own agreement. I'm just curious if there was any kind of documentation that came up while we're looking, while any of this was being.
So that's valid. We didn't find anything like,
Okay.
because there's a file that is rather enormous because of the age and use of the property that the staff did go through rather tediously.
Okay.
But something to consider too is tolerance for the use of the property outside of the terms of the CU shouldn't really be a benefit to someone saying, we're going to legitimize it now. You know what I mean? So this really, we really need to weigh this on the merits of whether or not we think that what we're signing up for, or any changes that we enable, are in the mutual best interest, and that we're going to be able to police them, and that we're going to get what we bargained for, is really, you know, not looking backwards, but looking forwards.
And do we have trust in the people who are asking for it?
That's, yeah, that's hard to quantify in a.
It is hard, but that's true with any kind of contract you enter into, I think even on a personal basis, if it's going to result in a relationship going forward. I don't know, maybe it's a good idea for Amy to run through the list, because I think there's been some amendments to it already.
Sure.
And then go from there.
Okay, I'll do my best here.
Okay.
So the first condition would be overflow parking located on the east side of Nagawicka Road, which I have a tax key tied to it, is available as long as the restaurant banquet facility, and I would add located at 1807 Nagawicka Road, remains in operation. Overflow parking will no longer be permitted at such time the restaurant banquet facility ceases. And then I have on here, no other use of the property is, okay, I just wrote, no other use of the property is permitted unless this conditional use is for overflow parking is terminated, to make it clear that even residential or any other use, there can't be a secondary use on site, if that makes sense. And then this one, we were tweaking, vehicles shall only be parked within the lot during approved business hours of operation and within 1 hour of opening and closing. That would be changed, vehicles. And then I've got no overnight parking or storage of vehicles or recreational equipment is permitted, but you had wanted to change that for employees, that the vehicles are only allowed for employees or guests of the Commodore. So we'd probably say, vehicles shall only be parked, vehicles that accommodate employees or guests of the Commodore shall only be parked within the lot during approved business hours of operation within 1 hour of opening and closing, and no other parking is permitted. No other parking of vehicles or equipment or any other storage is permitted. I think that covers it.
Yep.
Employee parking shall be prioritized to reduce, and I guess I wouldn't use the Commodore, I would use the restaurant banquet facility at 1807 Nagawicka Road. I think you have to protect the fact that the Commodore could change operators. Employee parking shall be prioritized to reduce the amount of traffic entering and exiting the site on a continual basis. The site shall be monitored on a daily basis for waste management. The site shall be maintained in good and orderly condition. The application shall be reviewed by the Public Works Committee prior to the matter being considered by Common Council to determine required crosswalk and pedestrian signage improvements. Proper screening shall be installed to prevent any light pollution from extending onto neighboring properties and to reduce aesthetic impacts from the parking lot. If you want to add any specific condition there, you can. They're proposing that black mesh fence with wooden posts. The grass shall be maintained and mowed on a regular basis. The fire department is aware of the parking lot use and is equipped to access and serve the site in the event of an emergency. The parking lot shall be organized in a manner to ensure safe and efficient traffic flow. There shall be no trespass of lighting beyond the property boundaries. And then the city has the right to revoke this conditional use if the parking does not conform with the conditions of this approval, where a change in the character of the surrounding area or of the use itself causes it to be no longer compatible with the surrounding area, or for similar cause based upon the considerations of public health, safety, or welfare, the conditional use may be terminated by action of the Common Council following referral to the Plan Commission for recommendation and public hearing thereon. And then I have added the road shall remain clean and free of dust and debris. And entry gates shall remain locked unless deemed necessary based on expected need for overflow parking. And then I do have at the end of my report that the Plan Commission should determine if there should be any limitations on the frequency of overflow parking, including daily, seasonal, or year-round.
And what was your verbiage on an annual review of the CU?
Are you going that direction?
I'd like to.
Then I would say that this conditional use is subject
Well,
to,
let me just pause for a minute. Make sure I understood Tim. We're not saying we're setting it up in a one-year increment, but rather that every year we're going to do a review of how things are going. And at the end of that review, if there's a serious concern, then we can go into the process of revoking it versus saying we're going to set up one-year increments.
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way I'm understanding it.
I wouldn't advocate for every year. I would advocate for this 1 year from here to review and then put it to bed.
So you could just say this conditional use shall be reviewed in September, because this will go to Common Council presumably in September. This conditional use shall be reviewed by Plan Commission in September of 2025 for compliance of the conditions of this conditional use. It could be that simple.
I would disagree, Matt. I'd say it's an annual review, and it just gets on the agenda. Just because sometimes managers, I mean, we've had some, parking's touchy, and we've had, there's an issue with the boathouse where the compliance to this conditional use was, and on-street, off-street parking was, it varied with manager of the year. So we had to, it was a constant re-education.
Change in management.
Change in management.
Change in ownership.
Yes.
Change.
Just just staff.
Sure.
Sometimes it's well documented as you want
And
to
if
make
it's being
things.
reviewed by the Plan Commission, there's no undue burden on city staff or otherwise.
It'll be on, we
Just
can
an undue burden
get it on an annual,
Just to play off of what Mike said about number of occurrences, I think if we say overflow, we don't have to get caught up in, is it 60 occurrences, 90 occurrences, or whatever. We don't need to get into that, because we're saying overflow only.
I think
Right.
the verbiage Amy had about the gate being locked,
Yeah.
only open during times of anticipated overflow.
62, we could say
in there?
that. Well, it's not a condition, it's in their presentation. You could say that the parking is limited to a maximum of 62 cars.
That's a good point.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Yes, because they could start trying to.
So, just so that if I'm talking to the citizens in the area, if I'm reading this right, this is what I think is the read. Look, if we say no to this overflow parking, just no. The nights that there are going to be banquets and there's going to be, or events and there's going to be dinners, there are going to be cars up and down Nagawicka.
And people.
And there's nothing we can do about that. So to say no that's the effect that we will ultimately have. Now, you can have a whole nother conversation about how, because I don't know how it works, how you'd legislate against that. So it's like you pick your option here. Are you going to take an overflow when it happens big and it's in a safer environment? Or are you going to go up and down Nagawicka? Am I missing something?
Well, I think that's right, but I think somebody in the audience might be thinking, yeah, but you could change the parking on Nagawicka. My view of that is you could, but I go back to this is a 25-year business. And a new investor who came up and invested millions of dollars, and Ken, to Lauren's and Denise's point, is there a way we can do it where it's more comforting versus these lines in the sand that are just going to keep a lot of hot air in the room, and hopefully only comes into the room when there's, significant violation of their obligations.
and then there's parking on, like, you can park on Milwaukee Street, like down by wherever.
Yep,
It's,
good point.
it happens, but you don't want 8 cars on in front of one house. or
Yeah, because as I read it, Bartolotta's not going to stop having weddings and dinners. They won't say, okay, since we don't have this overflow, we're going to scale back dinner to 50% capacity. They won't do that. So you will line at Nagawicca unless you go through the process of changing. Okay.
So I have in there for number 10, just an add-on to number 10 maybe. The beginning of number 10, the conditional use is subject to an annual review by Plan Commission, and then lead into the city has the right to revoke the CU. Because it's kind of laying out, you're going to review it. If you feel there's anything, an issue, then you just process
Right.
by the code. Does that work?
Does for me.
And keep in mind that if this gets approved, a conditional use agreement is drafted and presented to common council. I can run by all the conditions with the city attorney and, she may determine that some tweaks in the language are required in order to get the point across, but.
I'll make a motion. Let's see here. That's a mouthful.
Can't you say pursuant to Amy's list?
Can I?
As in man.
Yeah, but I would like a read back. So I'll make the motion as our city planner indicated in the packet. Items 1 through 10 with addendums on number 1, adding 1807 NAG, no secondary use. Number 2, autos, restricted to autos, guests of the Commodore. No other storage or parking is
employees.
permitted. The road shall be clear, being added. Entry gates shall be remain locked, being added. The conditional use shall be reviewed by Plan Commission annually, and a maximum capacity of 62 cars.
I'll second that.
I would say, subject to a conditional use agreement being drafted for common council with city attorney review.
Subject to a draft agreement being reviewed by city attorney for common council review. I will.
Second.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
And you've been seeing people park on Nagawicca?
Yeah.
Have you?
Yep.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, it goes on from here. Need what? And if works for everyone, we'll take a 3 or 4 minute break. Recess for 3 minutes.
By now.
Okay, Plan Commission is back in session at 8:47 PM. So our next order of business is for DELC 0751025, 2730 Nagawicka Avenue, owner John Borman and applicant Patrick Smith. For a special exception approval to allow the construction of a single-family residence and attached garage that exceeds floor area ratio and open space on a non-conforming lot, and site plan appearance review approval for the construction of a retaining wall that exceeds 3 feet in height. So if the applicant would you mind coming up in case we have questions? And Amy, you want to
Sure.
give us a
I can-
5-second review?
Yep, I can keep this one short. I gave my entire report during the public hearing. So I would just end with a recommendation to approve the special exception from the floor area ratio and open space provisions, and approve the site plan and appearance review for the construction of a retaining wall that exceeds 3 feet in height, subject to a grading plan that includes existing and proposed grades on the subject property and existing grades extending at least 20 feet on adjacent properties, being submitted to the City of Delafield Engineering Department for review and approval to ensure the proposed improvements do not cause adverse drainage on adjacent properties prior to the issuance of a building permit. And a retaining wall design shall be submitted to the City of Delafield Engineering Department for review and approval to ensure the wall does not exceed 3 feet in height, is structurally sound and constructed so that it will properly contain and support the ground and pavements, walks, and other nearby structures. And the applicant is responsible for ensuring the lowest floor does not extend into the groundwater and that it is not subject to periodic flooding because of seasonal high groundwater conditions or any other condition.
Are there any questions on this? I've got one. Who's the neighbor? Are you your own neighbor with the retaining wall between you?
Both. The taller, so there's a retaining wall on the
One's over
north
3 feet.
and south side that border the driveway. And the 3.75-foot tall wall is in the southwest corner, which is not the owner. South side. But 3.75 feet is, like, I would say a 4-foot wall, it can be pretty typical. The wall will be 8 feet from the lot line.
Okay, that's typically, as we talked about before, that's typically my, my concern on these lots where we've run into issues in the past is what's before-after scenarios with water drainage or even aesthetics. This sounds like it's really close to the road, right? I mean, the highest point is close to the street?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the top of the wall and driveway will be at like 898.75, and where the wall is its highest, the adjacent yard grade on the other side of the wall is 895. .75 feet difference.
I'm all right with that. On your item number 3, we're not requiring them to submit anything to the city about possible flooding and high groundwater.
So what you can require a soil test if you want to. I don't want to take responsibility for this. That's why I think it should be their responsibility. But I do have quite a bit of experience with reviewing permits for basements in the groundwater. They have really good soils out here, but they're close to Lake Nagawicka, and the types of soils are pretty sandy. So it is highly, highly likely that the groundwater elevation is in line with the elevation of the lake, and they are 2 feet above the elevation of the lake, which is pretty typical. You want to be at least 1 to 2 feet above that high groundwater elevation. So it appears they will be, but I think when they dig the foundation, they are going to probably, because the foundation and footings are going to go lower, they are going to expose the water table.
We're actually doing shallow foundations. And then
They'll-
we do have a soils report because we had to, because the soil's so.
Would you mind speaking into the mic?
Yeah, we do have a soils report that actually has the groundwater located, and we're below that based on what we needed for the low foundation.
So will there be dewatering during construction?
I can't say for
Too
sure.
hard to say yet. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure we'll be okay. The other thing we're doing a little different with the foundation is we're actually using a geofoam system as opposed to deep piles or anything like that. That's gonna help us keep the foundations up higher. So it's a hybrid system, I'll call it, for residential work. So,
I think it would be helpful if they submitted their report to Scott for review, and if he has any questions, he can share it with
yeah.
SEH.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, so we do have all the walls are already designed by structural engineers, and they use the same soils reports to get their walls designed. So we'll just hand that to whoever needs it.
Yeah, let Scott have that.
Okay.
Is the new house going in the same general area as the existing one right now?
Yeah, it moves back off the street a little bit. It's currently, probably needs non-conforming in a number of different ways.
Yeah, I think Amy brought it up before, I think it's a little, so the setback off the street's 25 feet, I think the existing house might be 15 feet off the house.
Okay.
So it's tighter to the street.
So you can see, so on the screen, this isn't, it has the retaining wall in the wrong spot because this is from last month, but you can see the old house. And then the new house, the new house is in red. So it overlaps it, but it is closer to the water.
Yeah. Why I asked was because if the new house is in that general area, if he's had water problems now, he would know what he's in for if he went too deep.
Correct. Actually, the soils engineer said the same thing. It was kind of funny because I had no idea that because of the pressure of that existing house in the soil actually helps us in the long run, so.
Oh.
And I was there in the 2008 flood. That was as high as I'd seen it. I've been there 20 years, and it is low, and want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
That was a pretty good test,
Yeah.
2008.
Yeah.
That was the
You know what precautions and to take so that you don't have any problems. Good.
Any other questions? Looking for a motion?
I'll move approval
Turn on.
Your mics.
I'll move approval of a site plan and appearance review pursuant to points 1, 2, and 3 as noted by the city planner, and point 4 added at the meeting to review the plan with the city building inspector.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Or abstentions? Okay. Next step, was that, who seconded? Was that?
I did, Dan.
Dan.
I think we're good.
Good luck.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, next item.
Bubbles, 10.
Let's go. Item number 10, new business. A DELC 08039999 North 101 State Road 83. Owner Munger Holdings LLC, applicant MSI General. Applicant is requesting feedback and that a public hearing be scheduled for a conditional use permit to allow Bubbles Foam Farm to redevelop the property as a car wash.
Okay,
Okay, Amy, want to give us the first pass?
here we go. Sure. Do you want, should they give their names and addresses?
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself, please, gentlemen?
Turn the microphones on.
Just hit the big bar across the little green light goes on. There you go. All of those work too, so you can all turn them on.
Christopher Mullet, co-owner of Bubbles Foam Farm,
And we need an address too.
935 Emerald Drive, Hartford, Wisconsin. Will Lepke, 632 East Washington Street, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin.
Cameron McFarland, MSI General, 391 Wildwood Ridge, Colgate, Wisconsin.
And John Coots with MSI General, we're P.O. Box 7, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin.
All right, Amy.
Okay, so the applicant is proposing to redevelop the Hardy site as a car wash known as Bubbles Foam Farm. They have an existing operation on the east side of Highway 67 in the city of Oconomowoc. The proposed development they're proposing here is similar, but will have a little bit more intensity of use. The property is zoned B3, which allows car washes as a conditional use, so they do need to go through the public hearing process. This meeting will not require any action other than to provide feedback and possibly schedule a public hearing if you feel that, that's appropriate. They are proposing a 5,514 square foot, one-story building. The building does comply with all of the zoning code requirements. And then there will be 3 lanes of queuing vehicles, and that should accommodate up to about 40 vehicles. And then in the center of the site, there's additional parking for vacuuming, drying, and general parking. And then the access to the site, if you look at the screen, it currently is located on the northeast corner of the site, right as you come into the property from 83. They would close that and move the access point all the way to the west side and have an in and out with a little median strip. So it would be a one-way in, and then you go around and leave the site. There's also, I don't have a great image of it, but if you can recall, there's a road next to, on the other side of Olive Garden that goes up behind McDonald's, and the easement extends onto the south side of the site. It accommodates the subject property and the adjacent property to the north. That easement is no longer needed, and so they are working through vacating that easement. In fact, it's necessary in order to develop the property. Once they get through that process, if they do, they would be willing to restore that road. The fire department has determined that they do not need that road for emergency access purposes. They are proposing a dumpster enclosure in the middle lanes of the parking on the north side of the property that would have a fully enclosed fence-type enclosure. It is at a turn, so they would likely wheel out the carts, which they do at their existing site, for the trucks to come and get the waste. DOT, they did reach out to DOT. They are not requiring any additional site improvements to the property. The project will result in less impervious surface than the Hardee's site that exists today. However, they will need to address water quality, which they're proposing bioretention between the queued bioretention area between the queued vehicles and the parking lot. That would all need to be reviewed by our engineering staff. They would need to get stormwater permits and record a stormwater maintenance agreement for that. They are proposing a new retaining wall in the southwest corner, which would require engineer certification. I believe that's proposed to be at about 5 feet. Does that sound right? 5.5?
Correct, yeah, the highest point's about 5 feet. There's actually one there right now if you look closely through the overgrowth, but yeah, it's in the same location.
Okay. The property is in the wellhead protection area. There is an ordinance that relates to that, which means they can't have any underground tanks, and they can't store any hazardous chemicals or have resulting hazardous materials. So they are undergoing engineering review for that. One of my recommendations is just that the public hearing, if you do decide to schedule a public hearing, that it be scheduled after that review is submitted and reviewed by the engineering staff. They do have to meet the fire department's turning radiuses with the development. They've been given that information. And then they proposed a landscape plan, which you can see on the screen. With that, I would recommend on this site sending it to the engineering staff for review, just to make sure that the species that are proposed are salt tolerant and that they are considering snow removal, since it's so critical to have access around the whole site. And then I know deer resistance is always a priority as well. They are proposing to modify the lighting. There will be parking lot lights and wall-mounted lighting. That plan might be adjusted slightly in order to comply with the table of the ordinance. So you might see some changes to that plan. And then the building itself, you can see on the screen and in the packet, will include white smart siding. On the sides, there's some shakers, shake siding in the dormers and in the gable. And then they'll have some gray brick veneer on the base of the building, and then the roof will include asphalt and metal gray roofing. And then there's some black accents in the windows and the venting in the roof area. They do have some renderings that show signage. They don't have any signage dimensions or materials designed at this time. This is just to give you a general idea of what it might look like. They are proposing to have a weather vane on the top of the building that includes the Delafield logo sailboats. And they did not submit the business plan of operation yet. They're just still working through making sure they can get the conditional use in the first place. And then they can either submit that business plan of operation as part of the CU when they come for the public hearing or at a later date before they open. I think that covers the general staff report.
Amy, can you address this bioretention basin?
Are you asking me what it is? I think that's
Well,
a
I think I
great
know what it
question
is.
for MSI General.
Why don't we
I think I know what it is,
Why don't we
but-
let them give an overview on
Oh, okay, I'm
just
sorry.
in general, and then jump in, you have your first question after you're done with that.
Okay, all right.
Sure, yeah, the bioretention basin is essentially an area that the stormwater runs into from the pavement, and it filters before it goes into your storm system. It's used all over the city of Delafield to provide water quality and filter the water before it goes into your storm system. This site is all served by a stormwater pond that's to the west. There's a ditch that all the water from Hardee's currently just drains right into. And so this development would actually improve that by running the stormwater through essentially a landscaped area that has a lot of plantings in it that filter the water before it goes into your storm system. So generally accepted water quality treatment that also provides some landscaping. It looks nice. It's green space.
I have a follow-up question. Should I wait till they're done?
Yeah, Chris, why don't you just give, one of you or both, give an overview of what your, I know we've talked, but what your goal is here. I mean, it's obviously open a car wash, but give us some details about Bubbles and what you're looking to do.
Well, that's feels like a loaded question. I mean, honestly, we would just like to keep growing our business and creating jobs in the community. We reclaim our water. Car washes can use a significant amount of water, but significantly less than at-home washing in your driveway. So we have a reclaim system that reduces our freshwater usage by approximately 75%. Our average car count right now in Oconomowoc is about 278 cars a day, and we use about 12,000 gallons of fresh water instead of 30, 40, 50,000 gallons of fresh water a day. Our biggest days of the year are the bluebird days in the winter, when everybody wants to get the salt off their car. On those days, and the reason we have so much stacking at this site is we believe it's going to be a very busy site, is over 1,000 cars a day. We have over 30 employees in Oconomowoc. We have 4 full-time employees, and the rest of them are high school kids from Oconomowoc, Lake Country Lutheran, Arrowhead, all the other schools around town. And we have memberships, so you can get a better deal on the per wash price. And we also sell per wash, buy per wash or pay per wash services. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's decent.
Has anybody not been there? I can go into more detail about what it is. Okay, so across the road by Target, there's one of these car washes. It's a Valvoline car wash, and basically you have an attendant you have 3 pay stations, go up, pick your wash. You have an attendant that escorts you in. We pre-wash your car, and then you go through a 140-foot tunnel in this one. 140-foot tunnel. It pulls you through, automatically washes your car as you go through. When you get out, or when you exit the building, we have vac stations, and at all those vac stations, we have towels, so you can wipe down your car, you can wipe down the inside of your car, you can vacuum your car. We have Windex, and we have, sometimes we have leather conditioner, and trash cans. We keep our site nice and clean. That's one of the things, if you've been to our site in Oconomowoc, we're right next to Quick Trip. Our site's regularly much nicer looking than Quick Trip. And we're picking up a lot of Quick Trip wrappers. And so we'll have garbage cans at every vac stall, and then you just drive on out. It is not a full-service car wash, which a lot of people ask for. Like, why don't you dry the car off for us? But as everybody knows, this day and age, it's hard to get that many people to do that much work for, labor's tough.
Given the high volume, are you concerned about the space? Because you're kind of tucked into a corner. And just as a side note, I couldn't be happier to see somebody developing that. I mean, I go by there every day and I see that old Hardee's, and it's like, I get people asking me all the time, is something going to go in there? I'm glad to hear something could go in there. But I guess when you look at the volume you talk about, is there a concern with cars getting backed up or getting stuck in there? Or I don't know enough about how it works and how you manage that. You're on.
There we go. Typically, on those busy days, if members are getting washes, they're inclined to just get their car washed and leave the site. So the backup isn't really a concern. And based on our stacking capabilities at Oconomowoc versus this site, we have considerably more stacking, probably 3 to 4 times more stacking set up for the Delafield site in anticipation for being a higher volume site.
Yeah, our stacking in Oconomowoc is only about 16 cars. And the most we've ever seen it back up is out to, was it Oconomowoc Parkway?
Oconomowoc Parkway.
Yeah.
And fortunately, most people are regular users and they're very courteous. They don't block any of the entrances or exits of anything. If they see it's blocked up, they'll drive past, come back later because they're members. They can come in anytime. We read the license plate with cameras, and it just lets them in automatically, so they can just come right in. 40 cars, even if we've been out to Oconomowoc Parkway, that is only like 25 cars, not even, probably more like 22, 23. So we have almost double that, and with this longer tunnel, our tunnel's only 130 feet in Oconomowoc. The extra 10 feet will allow us to run the conveyor a little bit faster and do a little bit more prepping before they get into the tunnel, so that backup doesn't occur, because that's where the bottleneck is the prepping and the pay stations.
Okay.
How many stalls?
I believe there's 20 vac stalls, and then there's 4 or 5 parking stalls. Is that right?
Were you asking parking stalls or just vacuum?
Drive in to have your car, because
Just
like.
one tunnel.
It's
just one tunnel?
It's a long
if
tunnel.
Can we put the layout up and I can kind of walk her through it a little bit?
Mike, can you put the screen on?
I think one thing, these types of car washes, if you haven't been to them before, if you go up to like a Quick Trip car wash, you sit there and wait 5-10 minutes for a car. This one, every minute or so, they're bringing another car in, because they can have more than one car in the tunnel at a time. The tunnel pulls them through.
Okay.
So it's much faster car to car than maybe what you're used to from a different style of car wash where only one car can be in there at a time.
We'll, with the 140-foot tunnel, probably process 110 to 120 cars per hour.
Yeah, so almost every 30 seconds, a new car is going in. So the wait time is much lower than other car washes, which allow for higher volume. And then, like Chris and Will were saying, we've actually designed this site for up to 40 cars to be stacked, which is almost, a half hour worth of vehicles, which they never get that much back up in Oconomowoc. But we wanted to be cognizant of the site here and the comment of there's not a lot of overflow availability. So, and that's been reviewed extensively. It's been discussed extensively with staff over the last 4 months. I mean, we've been trying to come up with a good solution that really fits well with their business model and this site.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
If I could just follow up on the drain water. By the way, this is out of curiosity, not out of concern. Does this feed into that current main drainage on Milwaukee Street underneath the road?
I believe it does.
Yeah, that all goes down
Yep.
into that
Okay.
area retention pond the
Okay.
city has.
How does the water get from up there?
Goes down to a concrete ditch
Yep.
along the road. goes under that road by Olive Garden, and then it makes a loop back there and comes into that pond.
Okay.
We put that in many years ago,
Yeah, I remember when it went in.
15 years
Yeah.
maybe now.
Okay, I was always curious as to what feeds in there.
And that feeds from Home Depot, all of that.
Really?
Goes into that regional pond, yep.
Okay,
It's all routed there.
and that never overflows, it just eventually
Not that I know
sinks
of,
down?
it has never overflowed.
Yeah.
It did
Pretty
prior,
good.
when it was
Oh.
Charles Dick's
Yeah,
Gallery.
he got flooded frequently.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You mentioned the retention pond, which takes care of, and I'm no engineer or chemist, but suspended solids, correct?
It reduces them, and technically, it's not a retention pond, it's a bioswale. It just, I mean, it's filtering the water, it's not holding the water, if that makes sense.
Sure. What kind of chemicals are being used? What about dissolved solids? What kind of, to wash the cars, what kind of soap? And will the wellhead, will the engineering study mesh that out? Is that what?
That's what they're.
That's what we've
they're
been working
reviewing.
on with,
Okay.
yeah, there's a list of requirements, regulations that we're working with them on to make sure that everything that happens at the car wash meets the ordinance. So the word chemical is somewhat broad. The use of what's used in the car washes today is very friendly, and there's many different options out there to make sure that they comply with different regulations. I'll just leave it
I
at
think
that.
we have to clarify something. The bio-detention retention is for stormwater.
Correct.
Not for the car wash.
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Stormwater, it
Yes.
takes out the total suspended, so it reduces them.
Yeah, the car wash
But none of
would not
these,
run, would
none
not
of
run
the,
through that.
whatever you want to call it, the soap,
Wastewater.
wastewater goes into the,
Correct.
okay.
Hopefully not.
It goes in,
Yeah,
where
that-
where does the
the-
wastewater go? Now I'm confused again.
So there's two retention concepts that we're talking
Okay.
about. One is the stormwater on the site, just
Right.
rainwater,
Yep.
On the
snow
pavement.
melt, anything like that. That's the bio retention that you were referring
Yep.
to. The other one is the water that we use in the car wash. It goes into 3 tanks that are holding tanks. They're basically large grease traps, and they go from 1 to 2 to 3. We pull it out of 3. All the solids sink in the first tank, which we pump out annually currently. And by the time it gets to the third tank, it's pretty much just soapy water. And then we put it back on the cars, and then it goes back into those tanks. And we keep collecting any oils, greases, or solids in that first tank, and then that gets pumped out by Pat Sanitation annually, and then they dispose of it per environmental regulations.
Okay, well, interesting.
And then, just as an FYI, those 3 tanks, if there is overflow, those just go into the wastewater treatment plant, and all the detergents we use in the car wash are made to be broken down by any form of anaerobic bacteria that it would be used in a wastewater treatment plant.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
And you have Rob in the loop at Delhart. You've talked with the GM. I know you have. You've talked with Rob Minima at Delhart.
We've had numerous conversations with Delhart, yes, because there's obviously a component there that the owners need to be aware of from a water and sanitary use cost, so yes.
They're the ones taking the wastewater.
Yep.
Any other feedback on the layout, the aesthetics?
I'll say I've used your Oconomo walk one frequently, and it is clean, very well run, well managed.
Thank you.
That wasn't aimed to be a commercial, but
is.
everyone knows it is well.
Sounded like one.
It is.
No, but we love the feedback, so
It
thank
is
you. We
clean
appreciate
and
it.
well managed.
Well,
You're
it
still
even
gonna
has
pay-
it has the Delafield spire too, you know?
Mhm.
Add another spire to the
Nice
list.
Look at that. So we're looking for a motion for a public hearing, is that?
So if you do that, what I would do is schedule a public hearing specifically for such time when confirmation is provided by the city's engineering department that the wellhead protection area ordinance provisions have been complied with, and the applicant well, I have on here, they need to finalize any plans and suggestions you made tonight. But it's important that the engineering department have an opportunity to review that wellhead protection ordinance.
So if that overlaps a month, that this will just automatically get the public hearing and the next available opportunity after
Right.
engineering? Okay.
So the reason why I wrote it that way is they may not make the September meeting. The other thing, I guess, Dan, for you maybe, is whether or not this needs to go to Public Works.
Yeah, I was going to add that.
So, should it go to Public Works in October after they have the report, or in September next week already?
No, I would think October.
October.
I mean, we got to iron out that wellhead protection area, and once they start getting some firm plans, then it should come to Public Works.
Okay.
So motion to schedule public hearing for such time when confirmation is provided by the city's engineering department that the wellhead protection area ordinance provisions have been complied with, and the applicant has finalized plans and addressed any concerns by the Plan Commission tonight, and that the further down the road, I guess when your site plans are done, that they're shared with the Public Works Committee for review and approval.
We have most of that done already, so we're ready to submit most of everything you're saying, Dan, just to make it clear to we are very far along. We've been working on this for almost half a year, so we wanted to.
You want to jump the public hearing?
We're ready to, yes. I want to make sure everyone knows that we're not at a point where this is conceptual and we need another couple months to design. We've got full civil engineer drawings. We have some tweaks we need to make. We've already provided, we already are ready to resubmit based on engineering comments that we have received. I just want the Plan Commission to understand that we are ready to move ahead. We don't need a lot of time at all, so.
Do you think that you will be on the September Plan Commission meeting?
We're
Public
ready to
hearing?
resubmit. We just wanted to get through this meeting
Yeah.
tonight to make sure there wasn't anything new beyond what we've already discussed with staff.
I just don't know, like with engineering, if they don't have the information next week is probably
I
pretty.
know, it has
Like
to
the
be
the
submitted.
packets are due today,
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Tomorrow they would.
We can talk about it in the morning, but you might have to be on the,
We understand. I just want everybody to know
I'm-
that we're not at a point where we need another month or so. We're ready to turn things in, so. Yeah. There's been a lot of engineering done. That's all.
Sure. I don't know if my motion was finished.
But did your motion have a date for the plans, for the
No,
Public
it
Works?
did not have a.
So you can, if they're ready, they can
Date,
go.
when they're ready to come in. I said when their site plans are available. Yeah, I didn't have any date attached to that.
You want to read back what you have, Sherry? If that's-
Sorry to interrupt you, Dan.
Get it?
It's all right. It's important to know.
Have them start over.
he can start over, that'd be great. It's essentially a copy of the staff
Sherry
report,
did
right?
not,
Yeah.
their pencil was not sharp enough.
Okay. Motion to schedule public hearing for such time when confirmation is provided by the city's engineering department that the wellhead protection area ordinance provisions have been complied with, and the applicant will finalize plans and address any concerns by the Plan Commission this evening and share their plans with the Public Works Committee for review and approval.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, or abstentions? Okay, gentlemen,
luck.
keep
Thank you.
after it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sitting through the public hearing. Next
Yeah.
time, it's your
You guys
turn.
picked- Oh, it's a short agenda, sorry.
Wasn't that fun?
It's our charity day.
I'm sorry, but I prefer to hand wash my car.
I'm
I
shocked.
hand
I'm
wash it,
shocked.
Okay,
and
let's
I
keep-
always wax it myself.
Let's keep going. Item number 11, comprehensive plan zoning and ordinance revision. Discussion possible action regarding acknowledge the updated zoning and land use plan maps for the revision date of July 17th, 2024, that are reflective of recent amendments that have been enacted by Common Council.
Okay,
What do we got?
so the zoning and land use plan map are just updated to incorporate the Delafield Parkway development. So we had to wait for that plat to get recorded and the lots to be created to, and because there was a transfer in lands with the Legion, the rezone to R4 for Delafield Parkway is noted, and then the transfer of whatever areas went to the Legion got put in that category. So that applies to the zoning and land use maps. I do also want to point out, because I don't want this to be misleading, the Seven Seas property, or the Commodore rather, the property to the east, the overflow parking that we were talking about tonight, was designated as a PUD, not a C. So there's two different designations. There's hatching for a PUD and there's dots for a CU. We did convert that from a PUD to a CU because it wasn't a PUD. It was an inaccurate designation, that's all.
Okay.
And that should be all that's different. So it's more of an acknowledgement, because the Plan Commission recommended and council approved the actual rezone and land use plan amendment previously.
So the action is to nod heads?
Acknowledge.
Agree? You guys see this? All right.
Yeah,
Any
I would make
questions?
I would make a motion and
To accept?
to acknowledge the maps.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay. I'll make a motion that the Plan Commission is acknowledging the maps and the updates on them.
I'll second Dan Cahalan.
Any discussion?
I just have a question. What's going in there? What's the development?
What's changing?
Yeah.
So nothing's really changing. So you went through a rezone and land use plan amendment related to the Delafield Parkway subdivision by the American Legion. That happened, 6 months, a year ago. But the maps get updated. The maps, the rezone and land use plan amendments weren't effective until the development went through. And the development went through, and then we had to wait for all of it to get recorded with the county so that the parcels showed up on the maps. So it's really just updating the maps to match the action.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make?
Yep.
Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, maps are acknowledged. Reports of city officials, correspondence, we had some. I think everyone read them. B, planner. Scott.
I have nothing.
Oh, shoot. You're over. You're over time. You're over time. Amy, sorry, Scott. Amy, what do you got?
I do have something I just want to bring up, because tonight we had the conditional uses. Going forward, you will see a little bit change in the procedure, the way that we conduct the public hearings. You notice the discussion occurred during the public hearing. When there's a conditional use or a special exception, you really want to get all information needed during the actual public hearing to give everybody the opportunity to comment and understand the project, and then close it, and then just deliberate after. In the past, a lot of that was taking place during the discussion and action time, so you'll see that consistently going forward.
Yeah, I'll do what I can to make it flow as smoothly as possible, but so what that also leaves us open to is if there's substantial kind of new information brought up by the public, and then let's say that the applicant changes something significantly about what they're saying, well, or we could do this, and that would take care of all those concerns.
Yeah.
We might go through another loop and have the public who's interested in saying, that doesn't even come close to taking care of my concerns, or yes, thank you, that takes care of it. You know,
No,
so
I'm
we
in
might go-
line with it, but I was confused.
I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
I thought, what's going on?
No,
We'll go do it
it
again.
worked
So-
well, though.
So
Yeah.
we might end up with another loop, because otherwise, the impression sometimes can be, public's heard, then we cut a deal, and that's not really how it's supposed to go. Since there was nothing, in my opinion, I think, likely concur that there wasn't a significant alteration in anything being proposed, so both sides were heard.
But we've
and
heard
we
that
deliberated.
concern over the years
But
from
if,
the
yeah,
public.
so if, like I
We
said, if
shut 'em out and-
something comes up that seems, let's do another loop, it'll be longer, but it might save the council an hour.
Yeah.
And it doesn't,
When they get it.
it doesn't prohibit bringing the applicant up during deliberation.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct. And I'm venturing a little further into her report as far as discussing this, so maybe we'll bring it up as a separate option, discussion before our next meeting again, just so everyone's aware. So, is that it, Amy? Okay, Scott,
Delafield Parkway is open. We're building houses.
Really, it's
I
open,
saw the road's all done.
Yeah.
all right.
Nice. And it's, if you haven't driven down it, but you can see how they saved the tree in the middle. We'll see if it lasts, right? There's a big oak in the middle of the road. So, all right. Plan Commission meeting dates and deadlines. A regular meeting is September 25th. And meeting submittal date is today. With no other business to be had, the meeting is now adjourned at 9:27 PM.